We're halfway through the week and still no noise from the Royals in the winter meetings. Do we expect that to change? We'll dive into it in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And you can also catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, where new customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Well, a little bit later of an episode that we are bringing you tonight, and it might be the same tomorrow, depending on what goes down in the afternoon. And what I mean by that is, with it being the winter meetings, I wouldn't want to do an episode in the morning or during the workday, because if a move was to be made, then we'd be doubling down on episodes. And I know it's not a bad thing for those that love listening to this podcast, but it's just a little bit of extra work on my end when I can just make it easier and wait till maybe all the moves are done being made before doing an episode. Now, I say that, and there's still a chance that something could break while we're doing this episode. And I'll stay on my feet. I'll be looking at my Twitter notifications if the Royals make a move between now and when I finish this episode. But it has been pretty quiet in the first 2 to 3 days of the winter meetings when it comes to JJ Picollo and the Kansas City Royals. I should also clarify that it has been quiet for the majority of Major League Baseball if you're not the New York Mets and you're not the New York Yankees or the Boston Red Sox. Those are the three teams, unless I'm leaving somebody out, that have made the news-shattering moves out there. Getting Juan Soto to the Mets, and then Max Fried last night goes to the Yankees, and then this afternoon, Garrett Crochet goes to Boston in a deal that sent 4 prospects, including Kyle Teel and Braden Montgomery, to the White Sox. So the White Sox know they have to tear it down. They've been stockpiling a lot of prospects, and I don't believe that Garrett Crochet is the only guy that's going to be going either in this winter meeting stretch or at some point in the offseason. But for a lot of teams out there, and even contending ones at that, it's been pretty quiet. And the Royals are a team that have expressed that they're going to be looking for a middle-of-the-order bat. They have been linked to a guy like Josh Rojas, who we'll talk about in the second segment. I believe that could be a really good fit. And, you know, we always say where there's smoke, there's fire. This feels like another one of those scenarios where that smoke could eventually turn into a fire. Annie Rogers put out a good article, and she's done some great work throughout this week, that JJ Picollo has said that they're looking for a left-handed third baseman. Does that mean Brett Beatty? I know we talked about that on Monday's episode. We'll have to wait and see toward the end of this week. It was reported yesterday morning, I believe, right as I was getting ready to do my interview with LP Langevin, which we had to pivot rather quickly. I know I did get some comments about the connection problems, and unfortunately, there was nothing I could do about that because 5 minutes before we were about to do the interview, StreamYard went down. So I had to pivot to using Zoom, and then we had to make with what we had there because that was the time that worked for him. But hopefully you still were able to catch a little bit of the good stuff that he was able to say on how his offseason's been going. But right before that interview, it was reported from Mark Feinstein, who's one of the main reporters out there, saying that the Angels were close to trading an outfielder, and he referenced Taylor Ward as a guy to watch. We know the Royals have had interest in Taylor Ward as early as last month, really, so it hasn't been that long that the interest has been maybe not as known or maybe not reignited, if you will. So Taylor Ward is still a name to watch for me. Josh Rojas is somebody to watch. And I do think Brett Beatty is still somebody to watch. And the Royals are probably sifting through a lot of different trade opportunities. They're probably exchanging names. It was reported this morning that Angel Serpa is generating some trade interest. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. And I think I would urge fans that are maybe panicking or feel stressed out, if you are that dedicated to the winter meetings. I know I am, and it's been a boring 3 days if you're a Royals fan because no moves have been made. But I don't think it means that the rest of the week is going to be quiet, because all of baseball has been oddly quiet. I think there hasn't been a flurry of moves that I expected. But JJ Picollo did say in one of Andy Rogers' articles that they felt like the deal with Juan Soto was going to be this, dam bursting, if you will. That after he got signed, everybody else was going to be signing throughout the next couple of days. It was going to start this chain reaction. And I do believe that to be the case. There are just a lot of big-name free agents out there, some represented by Scott Boras, that are going to wait and be very diligent about which teams they're talking with, what the dollar amount would look like. And so not everybody's going to sign in the winter meetings. That might be the misconception with some. To me, though, I think for teams like the Royals, I think for teams like the Tigers, the Twins, and Cleveland, all in the American League Central, they did make some news yesterday in trading Andres Jimenez, a great defender, a 5+ WAR player, and they, I guess, wanted to subtract a little bit from their payroll and get even younger than they already were, being the youngest team in baseball. But, Cleveland's that team that's not going to be hunting for the top guys out there. Minnesota's been completely quiet. And Detroit, I think, is trying to make a play for Alex Bregman, but there's a lot of teams out there like the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Astros that are absolutely going to be making a play for Alex Bregman. But for the Royals, I think it's more so on the trade front. And trades are hard to navigate because you can't really get a pulse on what everybody's thinking or what that team's thinking. When it comes to a free agent, right, every single day we're hearing, oh, this team, and this team are interested in a star player. When it comes to a trade, it just sort of happens. We might get a report of somebody's working on a trade or the Royals have interest in this player, and you find out they would have to trade for that guy for the deal to be done. And that's why I think in these next 2 days, we could see more movement. I really do. I almost wonder if the Royals really trying to focus on making trades are having to go through a longer process than just handing out money for a free agent. Now, the guy we're going to talk about in our second segment, Josh Rojas, they could get a deal done through free agency. Maybe they would be working on a dollar amount. But right now, those are the guys that I've sort of highlighted and looked at based off what I've read from Andy Rogers, based off what's been said by David Lesky out there, what's been said by some of the national reporters. And I think with the Josh Rojas situation, it was an article done by Ken Rosenthal last Friday, I think it was, him and Will Salmon. And they went over to the offensive guys to look at for the Royals and said that Jurickson Profar is likely out of the price range, but somebody like Josh Rojas could be a fit. And that felt too random for it to just be a dart throw. Like, those are established reporters. Ken Rosenthal and Will Salmon do fantastic stuff. They wouldn't just throw out Josh Rojas's name if there wasn't interest or if the Royals weren't trying to make something happen. And then Andy Rogers confirmed in one of her articles this week that the Royals do have interest in Josh Rojas. So that's a different story where they can be trying to make a move through free agency, through spending some money. And I think their other piece could be a trade. And I'm starting to get this feel, too, that if they acquire a Brett Beatty, if they acquire a Taylor Ward, I'm not sold that would be their middle of the order bat. Taylor Ward could be, because he's got that 25 home run potential, and he would be a great guy to plug in to the middle of the lineup. But if they go out there and they trade for Brett Beatty and bank on the upside, right, because he hasn't put it together at the big league level yet, he would be the starting third baseman for the Mets if the season started today. But if they were banking on that upside, I still think they'd go out there and try to find that middle of the order bat. It may mean that Brett Beatty would be their starting third baseman and Michael Garcia gets traded, or Michael Massey does. But to me, if that's one of the moves, or Josh Rojas is one of the moves, they're still trying to work something out with a middle of the order bat. And there's plenty of names out there that would make sense. You just have to evaluate what every team's goal after the winter meetings is going to be, right? If it's a team like the Rangers, I know we've brought up the name of Adolis Garcia before. The Rangers appear in the last couple of days acquiring Jake Berger and then also bringing back Nathan Eovaldi, that they're going back in. They're trying to win, and taking Adolis Garcia off that roster doesn't feel like a likely thing to happen at this point. So you're trying to match up with a guy you like, a player that you feel like can fit, and a team that is interested in shredding some payroll or is trying to rebuild a little bit, get younger guys a look. And that's why I've looked at the Angels before, but are they trading Taylor Ward? Are they hanging on to him? Who knows at this point? With the Mets, I would see it more so of they want to upgrade at third base, and Brett Baty is a high ceiling, I would even say a low floor candidate for the Royals to try out at third base. You know, bank on the prize prospect status he once had. They did it with Cole Reagans. Maybe they could make it work with somebody on the offensive side of things. So to me, I still think there's a chance for something to happen tomorrow. I still think if not, there's something that could happen on Friday. But once we see some of those other middle market to smaller market teams making more consistent moves, I think the floodgates are going to burst open and we'll get a far more active day during the winter meetings. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, let's talk about Josh Rojas a little bit. This, to me, more than any other player that's been linked to the Royals in the last week or so, feels like has the most smoke that could lead to a fire. We'll talk about him next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our one and only sponsor today in FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. For my pick, Thursday Night Football, 49ers and Rams. Give me the over on receiving yards for Puka Nacua, who had a great game against Buffalo last time out. This is a segment I've been looking forward to doing. We had to postpone it a little bit. I thought on Monday that we would go over this Josh Rojas news and the Royals being interested and why I actually think it'd be a very fun fit for this team. And I do think in a lot of ways a big-time upgrade over what they had last year. So for those that need a little bit of catching up, last week, Ken Rosenthal, Will Salmon, as I mentioned in the first segment, did an article. They bring up Josh Rojas as a guy to watch for the Royals. And then Annie Rogers this week did an article confirming that report, saying per sources, the Royals have had interest in Josh Rojas. And it got me thinking, and it had me go back and do some more digging on past articles going into the offseason. And one of the first ones I remember was done by, I want to say Will Salmon was involved, and Katie Wu. And it was about the Royals in the leadoff position. It was the same article that talked about Jonathan India when looking for a leadoff bat. And in one of the first paragraphs about the Royals, it talks about the Royals wanting to get somebody that is an upgraded Garrett Hampson, somebody that could play center field, shortstop, and second base, if I'm not mistaken. Now, when I first read it, and this still could be the same thing, I had a feeling they were meaning that's the leadoff bat they're looking for, somebody that could play multiple positions and can get on base at a high clip. That's clearly not Jonathan India. Jonathan India can get on base at a high clip. He's got a top 5 walk rate in all of baseball. He's a second baseman. He's open to playing third base. He's open to playing left field. He ain't a center fielder, shortstop, and second baseman, even if he took reps there. But Josh Rojas kind of is. And Josh Rojas, to me, would be the better version of what you were hoping to get out of Garrett Hampson and Adam Frazier. And there's always a chance, and I know this is going to upset some people, there's always a chance they bring one of those guys back because they like their defensive flexibility. They liked what they were able to do on the base path a little bit, more so talking about Garrett Hampson there. But Josh Rojas, to me, is sneaky valuable. And here's why. I think you can plug in his last 3 years and kind of get a rough estimate as to what he'll be in 2025. He's not an exceptional hitter. But from what you got with Adam Frazier and Garrett Hampson, I think this would be a tremendous upgrade. And it wouldn't be a move that's talked about by opening day. I think you'd be talking about that move midway through the season. Now, Josh Rojas is somebody that was an Arizona Diamondback, got dealt to Seattle. And I even think last year, despite not having the best bat, put together a great year because of his defense. You've heard us so often with Kyle Isbell say, man, if he was a league average bat, that's a really valuable player here because he's so good defensively. He could be a 3-WAR player just alone from his defense, put together a good enough bat, and you feel really good about that guy being an everyday player. But in acquiring Jonathan India and having Michael Massey there and talking about one of those guys moving to the outfield or maybe moving to third base, you want to be able to have a super utility guy. But I also think not just a throw-in, right? A guy like Nick Lofton, for example. I like Nick Lofton a lot, but Nick Lofton is not, I think, a automatic upgrade over Garrett Hampson and Adam Frazier, just because we haven't seen it before yet. Josh Rojas last year played 142 games. He had a 2.2 B WAR. He hit 225, but a 304 OBP. He had an OPS plus of 91, but he was an elite defender. 8 bombs, 31 RBIs, 10 stolen bases. He plays third, second, and the outfield. So you've got that there, right? When we talked about the upgraded Garrett Hampson, he plays the outfield, he plays second, he plays third. He doesn't play shortstop, but with the Royals saying that, it feels like that's our hope is we can find somebody like that, but we're also looking for a super utility guy that can play both the infield and the outfield. This would be a cheap option, in my opinion, and I think this would be a guy that you were okay giving the same amount of workload that you gave Garrett Hampson and you gave Adam Frazier, right? Now, he is a left-handed bat, so I would say more so of what Adam Frazier gave you. You could platoon him with a couple different guys. I think it would be a really good fit. And right now, if I had to, if you had a gun to my head and said, I want you to rank these players on the likelihood they end up in Kansas City between Josh Rojas, Taylor Ward, and Brett Beatty, I think Josh Rojas is the top of that list, and I think by a wide margin. Just because you lost Adam Frazier, you lost Garrett Hampson, you want that flexibility there. And not just flexibility. Here's what Josh Rojas has over somebody like Garrett Hampson or Adam Frazier. He's elite defensively. Absolutely elite defensively, and that's hard to come by for a super utility guy. When you're talking about a super utility guy, you're hoping he can just manage that position. You're not hoping for elite defense. You're just hoping he can handle that spot. Josh Rojas does better than that. Josh Rojas is somebody you can count on to give you above average defense. And so now you think about a scenario in which it's a playoff game maybe, or it's a must-win game and you're making defensive replacements out there. You know, Dairon Blanco had some adventures out there, but he was used at times as a defensive replacement for MJ Melendez or Hunter Renfroe. Josh Rojas could be that guy that you could pencil in just about anywhere, and he can go over there and play that position. I think he even pitched for the Mariners, more so in a blowout, of course. But he has that super utility feel. But the rare part of him is that elite defense. And I do think the bat for a player like him is good enough. If he gets on base at a 304 clip next year, that is miles ahead over what you really got all season long from somebody like Garrett Hampson or somebody like Adam Frazier. I think this is somebody you could at times hit at the top of the order, toward the bottom of the order. He's that flexible, in my opinion. And to have that in Matt Quattro's lineup, you are the golden player, if you will. I mean, Matt Quatraro loves to have guys that can play everywhere. You can put him anywhere in the lineup, kind of that Swiss Army knife, if you will. And I think Josh Rojas would be that for the Royals. And he's also only a few years removed. I think it was 2022 when he had a 3-WAR season, a little bit north of a 3-WAR season. Hit nearly 270, 9 bombs, had 23 stolen bases, a 740 OPS. I do think that there are metrics to him that should be intriguing and should be worth spending money on if you're the Royals. He was in the 89th percentile in chase rate. He was in the 94th percentile in outs above average, 85th percentile in fielding run value. He was also in the 84th percentile in squared up percentage. He was in the 69th percentile in walk rate. He also, is kind of slightly below average and striking out in the whip percentage, but not detrimental. It feels like there's some other things to like about him. No, he's never going to hit for power. He's not going to hit consistently, but with the defense, being a league average hitter, I think that's worth taking a chance on when trying to upgrade over Garrett Hampson and Adam Frazier. Okay, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, it was also reported from Annie Rogers of MLB.com that the Royals have done their due diligence when it comes to Japanese star Roki Sasaki coming over from Japan to pitch in the States. What do we think about that, and what does it really mean with the Royals doing their due diligence? Is there a chance that Roki Sasaki ends up in Kansas City? We'll tell you next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And reminder, you can always find us wherever you get your podcast: Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. And one last reminder that beginning next week, because I did look it up, the 15th is on Sunday. So beginning next week until about late January, early February, we'll be having 3 episodes a week. So next week, if you didn't watch any of our episodes and you're going, man, why is Jack only giving episodes every other day and only 3 a week? That's why. Even us podcasters for baseball have a little bit of an off season, but we will still be bringing you 3 episodes a week, and guaranteed that one of them will be a Mailbag Friday. But to close out our episode tonight, I thought it would be noteworthy to go over the news of the Royals doing their due diligence on one of the biggest free agents out there in Roki Sasaki coming over from Japan, pitched for the Chiba Lotte Marines. What does that really mean? And again, this was a great article done by Annie Rogers. I know I've referenced her a lot in this, but she's been very busy down there in Dallas covering the winter meetings and has been putting out some really good stories. And this one today did a good job talking about what's going on right now, some of the rumors, what's upcoming. And I think one paragraph that caught some people by surprise was Roki Sasaki and maybe the Royals trying to make a play on him. And in this article, it goes on to say that the Royals have done their due diligence on Sasaki and have had conversations about what a deal would look like. Now, Wolf, which is, I believe, Roki Sasaki's agent, if I'm not mistaken, Joel Wolf is, I believe, maybe actually I think Joel Wolf is another writer, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it is the agent. Yeah, okay, I was right the first time around. Sorry, I had to go on that, or had to go on the fly with that. So Joel Wolf is Roki Sasaki's agent. So after the Royals did their due diligence, had conversation about what a deal would look like, Wolf acknowledged that it's likely Sasaki prefers to sign once the 2025 international signing period opens. The 2025 window opens on January 15th, and every team's international bonus pool resets for the new period. Sasaki's negotiation window closes on January 23rd. Now, the Royals, along with Arizona, Baltimore, Cleveland, Colorado, and Pittsburgh, had the second highest pool in the 2025 international signing period at $6,908,600. They're in the midst of figuring out the allotment puzzle, but they aren't likely to be in the mix for Sasaki. And that last sentence right there is what I was going to echo, is what, if I didn't even read that whole paragraph, that's what I would have said. Because at no point in this offseason has J.J. Picollo, Brian Bridges, Scott Sharp, John Sherman, whoever you want to bring up, talked about adding a frontline guy because they feel like with the 3 they got, their rotation's pretty set. They'll add Chris Bubich into that mix. Alec Marsh will be one of the guys that has a chance to win a spot. Daniel Lynch could, but I'm also getting the feel that he's going to stick in the bullpen. Kyle Wright will get a shot, but even Matt Quatrero said it the other day that, they're just hoping that he can stay healthy at this point. That's the first obstacle they have to get over there. And they're going to be looking for a swing starter in free agency. Roki Sasaki does not fit any of those descriptions. Roki Sasaki is not a swing starter. When he joins a rotation, he will be a frontline guy. And even though we've gotten some reports of, well, he he wants to play for a small market team, or he's not liking the overwhelming media presence that they have on him over in Japan. Like it's too much for him, and he would like to go to a smaller market, unlike in New York or in LA, where they're constantly all over you, and the way they're all over Shohei Ohtani. To me, and this is just a guess, this is an assumption, so don't take my word for it if you don't want to believe me. It more so feels like his agent, and Wolf, is trying to get a lot of offers from a lot of teams. And the more offers you get, the better chance you have of getting the deal that you really want when it's all said and done. Is he going to sign with the Rockies? Is he going to sign with, a team like Tampa Bay, who's one of the lower payrolls in baseball? Likely not. And he's certainly not going to be signing with the Royals, in my opinion. The Royals doing their due diligence is the same way I think they did their due diligence with Juan Soto. Why not? Why not see if you could have some wiggle room, see if some price could match up? And even with the Royals having a big signing pool, right? They've got, what was it, a little under $7 million. They're not going to put all of that into one player. They're not going to blow all that money on Roki Sasaki. Really, because I think they want to be able to spread it around. That's the obvious answer right there. But because right now, their rotation's pretty set. I don't think that they have gone into this offseason feeling like they need to upgrade the rotation, and I can't really blame them, to be honest with you. They had the third most quality starts in all of baseball last year. It was a big reason why their team improved by 30 games. It was a big reason why they won in the postseason, or won a postseason series and gave the Yankees at least a run for their money. They need to upgrade the offense, and I know that Roki Sasaki would make that rotation all the better. And it's all about upgrading and doing this and that. But the focus from the beginning has been offense. It's not even been looking at the bullpen, really. They feel like there's a lot of guys that can be mainstays and guys that can improve in 2025 in that bullpen. They like guys to transition to the rotation and look really good and bolster the number 4 and number 5 spot. But in adding to this team through trade, through free agency, the focus has always been on the offense. And so when I saw the due diligence part, I wanted to make sure I read everything there. And I'm glad that Annie finished up the paragraph with, it's not likely that Kansas City is going to be in the mix for him. Because even if the Royals did want to make a play, I think it's all a smokescreen. I think that there are really just 2 places that he's going to end up. It's either going to be with the Dodgers, and I'm glad that now there is some more talk, more rumors about another team being in the mix. I thought probably 2 or 3 months ago it was 100% going to be the Dodgers. Wasn't even going to entertain another team. But I think we're seeing more of a push from the Padres. And so those are the 2 teams I'm eyeballing. I think it's either going to be the Dodgers and it's going to be the Padres. And now I'm going more so like 55-45 Dodgers. Because I do think at the end of the day, having Yamamoto in LA, having Shohei Ohtani in LA is a big pull for what the Dodgers are going to be able to do for their pitch for a guy like Roki Sasaki. But for the Padres, you do have Yu Darvish. They are not going to be having that type of media presence that LA does. Still wildly popular. San Diego's a big city, but LA coming off the World Series win, having Shohei Ohtani, having Yamamoto, and then potentially Sasaki in that rotation, you are talking about a pretty ridiculous group. Oh, and by the way, Blake Snell's going to be in that rotation. And you're talking about a lot of media every single game, even if it's a meaningless one in May. Like, the Dodgers are going to be highly coveted all season long, as they were this past season. And if that is truly what Roki Sasaki does not want, then I think San Diego could be the better play there. However, it's his decision. He'll definitely get a great offer. But I think, can pump the brakes a little bit in talking about any sort of play the Royals would have. One, they wouldn't be blowing all their money that they had on one guy there. And number 2, I don't think any of those small market teams could be able to contend with the heavy hitters there. Not for a guy like Roki Sasaki. I think that was more so for an entertainment purpose. Get more offers, get as many offers as you can. At the end of the day, though, I think we really know who is actually in play for Roki Sasaki, and the Royals are not going to be one of those teams. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second Find Locked On MLB as baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow might be a little bit of a later episode as well, so we can see if anything plays out in the winter meetings. Hopefully, though, we'll be talking about a new acquisition for the Royals. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.